My name's Barbara Davies-Quy and I'm Deputy Director at Size of Wales. Just briefly, who is Size of Wales? So we are a Welsh climate change charity that aims to support Indigenous and local communities to protect tropical forests the size of Wales, which, if you didn't know, is 2 million hectares. And we also help communities plant trees in areas that have been heavily deforested. And here in Wales, we do a lot of education work, inspiring climate action, and have a campaign to make Wales a deforestation-free nation. I'm really pleased today to be chairing this interesting and really important panel discussion on land rights and ownership. And we know that women's land rights are critical for democracy, justice, peace, sustainable development, and security for all. But nevertheless, in half of the world's countries, women still are unable to assert equal land and property rights, and less than 15% of all landowners in the world are women. So this has a kind of economic impact on families, on women, health impacts, their inability to grow food for their families, and to be able to achieve equality. And I think also the issue, and Pubudini will go into this much more later on, about the link between land and climate crisis, and how climate crisis is a human rights crisis, is also a gender crisis, and also an Indigenous rights crisis. We really need to be addressing the injustices around land, around who controls resources, and who has access to power, to be able to address also the climate crisis and other inequalities in our society. And I think today what we're also going to be talking about is how Indigenous peoples, who make up less than 5% of the world population, actually protect 80% of global biodiversity. They hold the knowledge. They have been protecting these areas for thousands of years, yet often have little voice to make decisions about what happens to their land. And I'm so pleased that Phoebe is here to share how powerful they are when they come together and organise and can bring about change. So we're going to be looking at all those problems and kind of opportunities this afternoon. We're also going to be hearing about the skills that Indigenous people and local communities bring, and women particularly, who are guardians of the land, and what we could maybe do here in Wales to support this work. So I'm going to briefly introduce the first speaker who we've got online today, Pubudini Wickramaratne. Sorry.
Do you want to switch it around? Because I haven't texted Pubudini.
Oh, she's coming on later. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to introduce Phoebe Ndiema, who works for the Chepkatali Indigenous People Development Project. That is a Size of Wales partner who we've been working with for many, many years in Kenya, and the organisation aims to ensure the tenure, environmental and human rights of the Ogiek people. She leads on the Gender Justice Project that focuses on leadership and governance and economic empowerment, and have been doing a lot of work with women to map their territory and the history of the Ogiek people. She's currently here in the UK for 3 months as a fellow at Oxford University in the Department of Biology, developing an amazing community-led biodiversity monitoring system. And she was born and raised in the Mount Elgon region and is a proud member of the Ogiek people. So Phoebe, thank you so much for coming across to Wales for your first visit, and we're really excited to hear what you have to say, and we're going to be sharing a short video, and I will hand this over to you. Should we put the video on? Record. Have you got a belt? I'll just put it on the table. Okay. And I'll put it right inside. That one got falling. Put it on here, that's fine.
Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction, Barbara, and I'm so happy to stand before you. Just to say that this work has been supported more by our Size of Wales, and we really appreciate them for holding us through our struggle. And this short video is was made by the community members just to honor the work that we've been doing in our community struggle. So
they say they wanted to evict this community from here in order to conserve, to come and conserve what? Nothing has been destroyed here. I mean, the forest itself was very intact. How did it come up to today that it looks like that? Was it not under conservation? If this forest remained up to this time like this, had it there not been conservation here? Because that question would have been answered by my great-great-grandfather who died here. Since time immemorial, we are concerned. And we are continuing concerning.
Sangdap tegande kumyola mwengoshe kula kumnyare alafu kumi wala gere meje sopego myola ge butingwe sigar kiguru kay taganyo churu kimi jogi pawala bana ambu ki kyan yo ge muje ngara kimbioro kusasa kama yo je ka sasa ge ke mapan je ka sasa le ndigo tagasao. The
environment here tells you about the people themselves. My livelihood depends on this land.
Kutang-atang kulele, so nga tsasa, wait, di lang mo, ngayon pa ni.
Kaya mo na siya puro tuwa kabanan. Ko pandai na babasin niya majo tuwa jo ngenta. Kasi ako ani ko. Kumena wali rin wali. Ama wali wali. Kasi kas bayi kas ini jak kini nganya nganya wali rin. Wali jak kini nganya wala sah. Kaya lagi kira jo. Asa ini kas segala jo. Bawa segala jo sah segala. Kurang itu je. Dia kasi ada wali sah segala. Dia kasi wali tak kuat. Kuna jo sah segala bawa lada ni bilang naga.
So human beings must try to learn also actually the requirements of other people. But go to the other areas where other people own. Every time you find an elephant having been speared, having been arrowed, having been killed by a bullet, in fact, elephants themselves are now realizing and getting to know that which area is kind for them to be.
Oleh daftar itu ada wala ada daftar as kalau oleh daftar Indonesia ada daftar kalau ada daftar anggi kan ada daftar ada itu memang itu nuas ada tu.
Sige mapana lorei sene bile go gilbo kyo bile so ko sorwe kingerele ipurne wanyaman ipurne bile alafu sio mire wakati nikiwa hiyo bile umebare kemura gelta nyare chine soro isugiri bagi sasa yoagi ngat sasa lo rai chine bele moya es lagi riba gila nesuma kwa because ujogi interfere na kono ibur ne bele.
When they say they want concern, they are not saying truth because they want to come here, evict us, and then poach out the resources, the natural resources around here today as we are seeing. Neighboring parts of this land that it has been taken away by the so-called agents of conservation. After clearing the then indigenous trees, they bring in exotic trees. No animal is grazing there today. I don't know whether they forget that we are a part of the ecosystem ourselves. The Ogiek community are a part of the ecosystem.
Ologi kebelen ngole kebelen bo kugage dumane ini ko so ngale kama pim ko ge gotu korenyo ko wawile ni nyo korera kama ni ma jam bija gumangira kiyogo yo mami amin bicho lirini anga adalo kyu kumudo lirini aga indumzo ron chezu to kuman bicho lirini wo korenyo lirini po.
Thank you so much. That is a short video done in the territory of my community, that is Ogiek, and I hope you liked it. It is emotional to us, but I hope you enjoyed it. So my talk today is motivated by the fact that I come from this community. I was born, I grew up in this community, and my community is doing so much to conserve biodiversity, but it is not recognized in the outside world. But we have partners like Size of Wales who have come to stand with us, try to make the world understand that not only Ogiek of Mount Elgon, but other indigenous communities are perfect custodians of biodiversity. So as a woman, there are so much challenges that we face, especially the fact that indigenous communities across the world face challenges of evictions because their territories are converted into protected areas, but it is not true. They don't want to protect it, but they want to get away with the resources in the land. So most of the time they face attempted evictions, the houses are torched, and it leaves women and children more vulnerable during the evictions. Hence calls the need of full participation by women in land right, because indigenous communities own their lands communally. There is no privatization of lands, and women play a key role in following up the tenure issues, and that is why today I'm here. So I will not speak about the organization. Barbara had introduced about that. So, and basically this is a Ogiek territory. This is my ancestral land. This is the land of my grandfathers, and I'll just sum it up like we don't enjoy the privilege of owning this land. We only have privilege to enjoy this small part of land. That means we have a huge task to ensure that this land is given back to the community, and those are the struggles of indigenous people. And just to mention that recently we've launched our cases in judicial system of Kenya, and recently we won a case against the government on this Chepkitale Native Reserve, which is a small portion. That means we still have a lot to play to ensure that this other land is given back to the community. And so today, being a woman, I want to talk about how women are playing a role in ensuring that land dispossession is minimized, or rather Ogiek territory is given back to its owners. So basically, as a community, we had two cases. We had a case on a degazettement. Degazettement means land is converted from being owned by the community to just being owned by the government, like you don't have freedom to enjoy your land. And then we have attempted eviction, where the conservationist, the Kenya Forest Service, comes and then like evict people, burn their houses, and through this organization, we were able to launch a case in court, and it is ongoing, where we want back our land, and we want to ensure that we enjoy the freedom of our land without being questioned or our houses destroyed. As you had an elder from my community saying that we are also part of the ecosystem, and we know how to interact with the ecosystem better than anyone. So women in land rights, what role are we playing as women in ensuring that the land issue is advanced in our community? So Ogiek women have played a greater role in contributing to, for example, winning of our land back. And the first thing is they are petitioners. They are witnesses in courts. They go and narrate on how well we can conserve the environment, and how well they were taking care of the environment using traditional knowledge, not the documented, the modern knowledge, but the traditional way of conserving environment. And that is a very important role as far as a community and a land right issue is concerned. And then also we have the fact that women have been participating in governance, where Ogiek women have association that they make decision also on behalf of the community by being sitting in a council of elders, which makes decision in the community on how well biodiversity can be utilized, the land can be utilized without sustainable way of utilizing the land without depleting the available resources. So another main way of women participating in land right issues is through mapping process. If you just remember the video, you could see some young women there participating along in mapping process, and that is we have over 20 women who are doing that. It is just a sample. She was just sampled out, but we have a lot of women who are taking part in a mapping process, and they are mapping bamboo areas. Bamboo areas is a forest, but to us it plays another important role in the community. And then we have the medicinal sites, we have the spring areas, we have the firewood areas. All these all areas come back to conservation, and that women are participating in that. So and also Ogiek women host what we call Women Exchange Program, where all Indigenous women across East Africa come together. They discuss, they share issues like how are they handling land rights issues, conservation issues in their territories. So they just come together. We have what we call community resource center. It provides a safe space for women to discuss how they are handling their issues back in their community, and then they come up with solutions. Basically, it's just strengthening the voice. They come together, make their voices matter as women in land right issues. So those are some of the issues on how women are participating majorly in land rights as Indigenous people. And so this is a safe space. These are women exchange. This is just women, like you can see, women who just came together, discuss on certain issues that affect Indigenous people, and they come up with solution. And the important one was coming up with a declaration that was read in a APAC meeting in Rwanda. That was sometimes last year. So that was so powerful, and we are glad that they were given platform to to read out of what it should be done, considering that they wanted indigenous territories to be protected areas. So OGF women are participating in mapping, as I said, and this is just a photo that was taken during our field work where they are mapping the areas that have direct impact to them. Yes, so basically, I just want to give you a simple summary of the way forward on how we want to, after we won the court case, we have the way forward of how we want to conserve our land. The first thing is we want to ensure that this land, this is OGF territory. It looks like all trees, but we live inside it. So we want to register it as a community land, to have one certificate that is owned communally. We want to develop plans, sustainable livelihoods, where there is no farming. We don't consider farming a sustainable livelihood in the forest, but rather beekeeping, animals like the cattle and the sheep keeping, and then also maybe developing a processing plant for the meat, and then adding value addition to the products like milk. We have also the basketry, and also just ensuring that we have our community bylaws working to ensure that we utilize this land sustainably for our current and future generations. So that is our plan, and I hope everything will work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Phoebe, and I know it has been absolutely a tremendous effort that the community has done for years. When did the court case start?
It started in the year 2008.
2008 till 2022.
Yeah.
So that is the determination of your community to keep fighting, a real story of David and Goliath, where, you know, the odds were against you, but you kept going. And we were really proud to be able to support you in that journey and to have the land rights now kind of secured. Now the next step is to get the land registered in your community name. Yeah. And I hope that that happens soon and that your other cases will come through. But I think this is one of the lessons learned, that if you want to work on land right issues, you cannot do 1-2 year short-term projects. You need sustainable long-term accompaniment, support, and just walking alongside you in that journey. Slightly answering one of those questions already. But thank you, Phoebe, for that. And now, yep, great. Pubudini Wickramaratne, who works at Oxfam. She's an international development sector professional with 20 years experience of working on policy advocacy on socioeconomic rights, land rights in particular. She's a lawyer and has extensive experience of working on human rights and public law litigation in Sri Lanka. She's now currently land rights policy lead at Oxfam International and leads on their work on land rights and works closely with country offices. And prior to joining Oxfam, she was country director of the Centre on Housing Rights and Evictions in Sri Lanka. And Pubudini is going to be sharing a briefing paper that they've done on how to secure land rights is a pathway to addressing loss and damage from climate change. So thank you very much for joining us again, Pubudini.
Thank you. I can start sharing, but I don't know whether I can do that while you're also sharing the screen.
I think you should be able to.
Okay, let me try. Do you see my screen now?
It's switching, I think. We will in a second. Yes, that works.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. So in my presentation, I'm going to set out a few points about the role that land rights play in addressing the climate crisis, especially addressing loss and damage. And I will present secure land tenure as a pathway to address the climate crisis and a mechanism to avoid, minimize, and address loss and damage. I say this because of the centrality of land to our lives. So as you all know, land is very linked to all aspects of our lives. So it is very much linked to our well-being, our economic development, food, housing, social well-being, our culture, etc. And this centrality makes land rights the base or the premise upon which many of our other rights are going to be realized, which means that any impact on the lands that we own or that we have a house on, it has a direct bearing on all the other aspects of our lives. So when we talk about the interconnections between land and climate change, land is finite resources. Finite resources. You can't expand, you can't grow it, and it's already under growing human pressure. These pressures, they come from different sources. They come from land use patterns, our policies, our agricultural and economic and energy policies, economic development models that promote large-scale infrastructure projects and large-scale industrial agriculture and mega energy projects. So these land uses, they have negative impacts on the environment. They cause deforestation, they cause depletion of water resources and loss of biodiversity, and they ultimately fuels the climate crisis. The land use is a key driver of climate change, and the IPCC has estimated that roughly 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from land use. So on the one hand, land is a driver of climate change. On the other hand, land is seen as a part of the solution to address the climate crisis. So land is seen as a part of the solution because land can store carbon. So there is a huge push for nature-based solutions to climate change. So these nature-based or land-based solutions to climate change, such as afforestation, reforestation projects, then bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So all these projects were originally intended to counteract the residue of unavoidable emissions, so that governments and corporations, they would take effective action to reduce carbon emissions, but what cannot be stopped, what cannot be reduced or avoided, they will use these methods to achieve the net zero. But what is happening now is these land-based solutions are now being widely used as an alternative for taking effective action to reduce carbon emissions. So they are used as a cover for continuing business as usual. So there's a big increase in the net zero commitments that have been made by the governments and the corporations. So they require massive extents of land, creating a lot of pressure on the lands. And Oxfam has calculated that the total amount of land that is required for these planned carbon removal projects could potentially be as much as 5 times the size of India, or equivalent to all the farmland in the planet. And where is this land going to come from? These lands are not freely available to use for these projects. These are lands on which people live. These are lands on which there are forests. These are lands which are biodiversity hotspots. And making these lands available for these so-called green investment projects is going to create or has the potential of creating a lot of problems. And that could include prompting irregular land governance models when governments are trying to make this available for these projects. It could impact the land rights of communities. So in that case, it is really important that these local communities and indigenous people have their land rights recognized by these governments, especially in countries where the legal and the administrative systems relating to land rights is weak and there is corruption. There is a big risk of land rights or generally the rights of communities being threatened. And there is also threat of deforestation, loss of biodiversity, increase in the vulnerability of the communities who rely on these lands, Local communities face risk of being evicted. Indigenous peoples risk losing their territories. The smallholder farmers, they risk being restricted to even smaller plots of land. And the important factor is that these are the people who have the most sustainable connection with land, and their land rights are threatened. And also, these are the people who have the lowest carbon footprint and who contribute the least to the climate crisis, but they are the most impacted. If we look at now loss and damage to land, there are extreme weather events like cyclones, floods, droughts, which have immediate impacts on the lands. And then we have slow onset events like rising sea levels, temperature rises, desertification, salination, which over a period of a certain time force changes in land use, affects the productivity of the lands, and cause land degradation. So these kind of losses and damage could be of permanent nature, where land could be totally lost due to landslides, or land could be totally washed away due to floods, or land could be totally lost due to sea level rises. Or it could be the damages in the long term, which affects the use of the land. For instance, due to salination, there could be land degradation and changes in land use in the longer term. Or there could be shorter term impacts. There could also be indirect impacts where the lands may be may not be physically lost or damaged, but the loss and damage that people suffer to other aspects of their lives, for instance, loss of livelihoods or loss of income, that may affect their ability to retain their lands, or they may not be able to pay rent or a mortgage. Or the land in itself could be sold or mortgaged to overcome other loss and damage. So these impacts threaten the land rights of communities, it affects their food security, and it also affects biodiversity. Why is land tenure security important? This is because these communities who are the most affected by the climate crisis, they often lack formal ownership of land and are more likely to live in marginal locations which have high exposure to climate hazards. They are extremely vulnerable, and they have less protection, and they have less resilience. And over time, when they continue to experience loss, these losses accumulate, and they continue to suffer greater losses and over time. So most of these communities are living in poverty. There could be small-scale farmers or living in high climate vulnerable areas. And in most cases, they have very low levels of tenure security. So they may not have formal ownership to their lands. They may not have legal documents to prove the title of their lands. Or if they have communal land rights, they may not have been recognized by the states, although they may have been occupying these lands for generations. Or there could be people squatting on lands or in unauthorized occupation of government or private lands, or on river or forest reservations, and so on. What happens when they don't have land rights? If a person does not have land rights, and if a climate disaster strikes, people may prefer to stay in the hazardous location because they don't want to lose their land, because they have no way of proving that it is their land. So they tend to continue to stay in those hazardous locations to protect it, rather than moving away to protect themselves. And it affects their ability to increase their climate resilience, because they don't have decision-making power over their lands. I will explain later. So secure tenure is very important aspect when it comes to increasing climate resilience, climate adaptation and mitigation capacity of the local communities, and also their ability to withstand and recover from loss and damage. So the role of land rights in minimizing or avoiding loss and damage. When one knows that one can live in a particular land for a certain period of time without fear of being evicted or losing that land, that gives them a certain amount of stability and security. So they could make investments on their lands, they have the autonomy to make decisions about their lands to make them more climate resilient. So they can decide from planting rice crops to mango, for instance, switch to perennial crops, or decide to build a well or make other investments to make them more climate resilient. They could invest on better climate adaptation and mitigation measures, and also it helps them to minimize and also address loss and damage. Just a few examples from Timor-Leste and Sri Lanka on how important land rights is in addressing loss and damage. Because what we found, Oxfam has done a research in Asia. We've covered countries like Timor-Leste, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And in all those 4 countries, what we found is that the fact that one owns a land determines the benefits or the assistance that one gets from the government to address the climate crisis, or to get their mitigation and adaptation support, or to recover from loss and damage. In Sri Lanka, for instance, farmer societies and irrigation societies are the main mechanism through which government-led support is channeled to the communities. But one can become a member of those farm societies only if that person owns land. So a farmer who's a landowner can only become a member of the farmer societies. And being a member of the farmer societies, they are able to access agriculture extension services, training, subsidies in relation to climate adaptation and mitigation measures, crop insurance, drought insurance, flood relief, or any other climate finance even that might come through to them. So without that ownership, there's a huge section of farmers who are left out of this scope. So tenure security in that case becomes very important. Then the second example is from Timor-Leste, where in 2021, Timor-Leste suffered a big, there was a big cyclone in Timor-Leste, which affected the capital Dili and the surrounding municipalities. So what the government did was, as an initial measure, they had like evacuation centers and temporary camps, and they wanted to build a new village for the people who lived in risk areas, but that did not materialize. So what the government did was they offered a support package for communities to go back to their original homes in their original villages. But this package again was to help build houses. So they gave money and also support in terms of labor to build houses. But only the people who own land in their villages could make use of could access this benefit, because only people who had land could build houses on their lands. So there was a huge number of people who remained in the evacuation centers or the temporary shelters, unable to access that benefit. Or so even up to now, a significant portions remain in those welfare centers, or some have been forced to go back to their precarious or hazardous houses along the river banks in the capital of Dili. So these examples show that if tenure rights have been secured for people, that helps them to access the benefits, and it determines whether people are entitled to relief in the first place and what benefits they get, and whether they get compensation or not. Like for instance, in Sri Lanka, in the Kegoa districts, when lands have been destroyed by landslides, alternative lands were given only to people who had deeds. So if you didn't have tenure security, then you would not be able to get an alternative land, even if your land has been lost completely. So a few other considerations.
Sorry.
Loss and damage to
Pubudini,
land.
I think we need to start just because we've got a break at 3 o'clock. So do you think
Okay.
maybe just summarise this slide? Is that okay?
Yes. This is my last slide.
Thank you.
1 minute. Just want to make the point that loss and damage not only affects the land rights of the people, but also it has ripple effects on other aspects. So when you lose your land, it has an effect on your livelihoods, education of your children, gender-based violence. Then it induces urban to rural to urban migration. It contributes to conflicts, reinforces colonial legacies, and exacerbates other inequalities relating to income, gender, and power. Just want to make the final point that land tenure security is especially very important in increasing climate resilience of communities, making them take decisions about their lands and invest on their lands to make them climate resilient. And especially when we are in a era talking about the loss and damage finance mechanisms, I think it is a very important factor that we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think that was a really fascinating presentation. And I think always the stat about, was it 5 times the size of India the land is needed to offset all the carbon emissions of the, I think is a shocking statistic that shows that the current model that we're working with is not, we cannot do that. We cannot use that much land to try and offset our carbon emissions. And I think showing how land can be part of the solution, but also the problem of the climate crisis was really well presented. So thank you. So we have a little, maybe if we could go 5 minutes into the break, we can have 10.
Started late, so
we started late, so
I hope everyone is okay.
Are people okay to stay a little bit and go into the break to make time for questions? Because I'm sure there are lots of questions. So yeah, I'll open up the floor. Would anyone like to ask any questions? Do you have a question? No questions. Can I ask you a question, Phoebe? Am I allowed? Can you talk me through a little bit how you do the mapping? How does it work? What training did you get? How long did it take to learn? And what have you done with the maps now that you've finished, or almost finished?
I think I'll just hold it like that. So I will be brief, but the whole process can take a whole day to explain, but I'll try my best. So in regards to mapping, we are using an application called Mapeo that is developed by organization called Digital Democracy, and we were trained online. Actually, it just happened that we started this project when COVID hit, and then there were no movement, so we had to do it online. So a small team was trained, that is the CAPDP secretariat, me included, and Elijah and our colleagues. So we had now to go to our community. Our community, it doesn't have network, so we had to go and train them without assistance from the developers of the application. And how application works is you just pick a point. A point here means we categorize the points in regard to land use, how our community uses resources, that is based on grazing, habitation, medicinal sites, what is important to our community. So you go with your phone, like it's an application you can download from the Play Store. You go with your phone, you take a point, and then you describe that point, because the mappers come from the community, so they understand the use of that point. After After you've taken the points, you extract the points into a base map, just the normal satellite map. So you have to transfer it. You just transfer the data from the phone into the computer, and then now you create maps based on that. Like, it has a lot of features. You can filter. You can use the way you want to use based on your needs, and that is how we used it in a court case. We filtered the information that we thought they're useful in proving to the court that we are custodians of that land, and it worked, and we won the case. Yeah, that is in brief. Yeah, I think that is it.
Pubudini?
No, thank you for the presentation. Maybe I've got a two-part question. One to do with location itself. It's on the border with Uganda, right?
Yes.
And I saw it, and I was like, you're dealing with the Kenyan side.
Yes. Yes.
So what is happening on the Ugandan side, so to speak?
Yeah. So our community is from a Kenyan side, and then Uganda side we have people called Bennett. The Bennett live in the Uganda, but we share a lot of similarities based on culture, language. So for them it is worse, because even eviction is continuing as we speak now. Their houses are being burned by the UWA, that is Ugandan Wildlife Authority. So it's just the same problems. It is same problems that the Kenyan indigenous people are facing. Is the same problem in Uganda, and it is even worse for them because they don't have I don't think their constitution even recognizes the indigenous people, unlike our constitution that at least there is articles that support registration of ancestral land. So that is the case in Uganda.
So there will go more fight.
Yes, but we are planning. We've been working together in exchange program, and we want to also help in mapping. Like, we want to extend the mapping program to them, so that at least even if it is launching the cases in East Africa Court of Justice in Tanzania, because their government is not helping. So yeah, we are working.
My second question.
Yeah.
Is that support or network aspect, because the Maasais are facing, and the Hadza, the people in Tanzania, are facing the same issues. Is there sort of like a network of indigenous communities that you support each other, because you're very much in different levels, so to speak, in the fight?
Yes, we have the Maasai of Loliondo, Simanjiro, and they're facing the similar problems. I think they were evicted, somewhere last year, and that is what motivated what we call East Africa Community Assemblies, where all indigenous communities from the 4, because they are the Batwa from Congo, come together, including the Maasai from Tanzania. So when they come together, they share, like, you share what are you doing in terms of your land rights struggle. We share our experiences. If ours has worked, like mapping has worked for us, then we see there is need of them picking up like what has worked for other communities, and it is really working. So it is a continuation. It was even it was hosted recently in a community called Sengwer in Kenya. It is also indigenous community. So there is that. There is a kind of loose network. It is not official network, but it is just starting. Yeah, the East Africa Community Assemblies. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. I could listen to you all day. I think maybe to both speakers, are there any other questions? No, maybe just the question of what can we do here in Wales to support women, and particularly Indigenous women and communities, to claim their land rights. But maybe someone from the floor has an idea, or if Phoebe wanted to share a few words, and Pubudini. She left. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so you want to?
I'll hold you.
Thank you. So for effective, or rather for at least a maximum turnout of Indigenous women in land right issues, There is something called the gender justice projects, where we want to have programs that deal more with women issues, and we've categorized into thematic areas. We have the thematic area on capacity building programs, where such programs like mapping, like training them on both policies, what do the local policies on land issues say, international policies, at least they be in line. And then also we have a thematic area on governance, where we would like to be supported on how women can be trained on leadership skills, like that confidence of ensuring that you speak properly and then speak on behalf of your community. And then we have other on transmission of traditional knowledge, because there are elderly women who are very good, like they can tell you how they used to conserve environment, but not using the modern way of knowledge, but the traditional. So if there is anyone who can support on a documentation and maybe doing videos and written, those are the some of the issues. And then also the rite of passage, where maybe old women come together, train the younger generation on some important skills that are getting extinct, like the basketry. For our case, we have basketry. There is a gap between the old and the young women, so we wanted to have a safe center, and then women will be coming there. They have sessions on rite of passage, where they're taught on how to do such activities. Yeah. And then also we wanted to have that's the vision. We have also we want to have a mapping resource center, where we store all our maps, including the letters that were written during colonial period, because they are strong evidences when fighting for land issues. So we wanted to have a mapping hub, where it is an archive for the community, so that other communities can come and learn and motivate each other going forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Phoebe. And if anyone does want to support your work, you can get in touch with Size of Wales.
Yes.
We can help with that partnership. So thank you, Fidili.
So just one last question. I was quite curious in terms of the forest. You said you're not growing or
farming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, farming altogether. Is this? I guess you're allowing subsistence farmers, but not big-scale farming.
No, we don't allow farming because we only promote sustainable livelihood, because we keep beehives. So we produce a lot of honey in Mount Elgon, and if anyone visits Kenya, at least get my contact so that you can come with some honey. So and then we have honey, we sell honey, honey is expensive, so we get some money out of it. We have a lot of livestock like sheep, goat, cows, so you sell, and then you get your income. And then now the good thing, the community is now investing. Like, you get enough money, you go and invest, buy land in town, so you go and invest there. Because if we introduce such farming in the forest, it is fertile, so people will be tempted to maybe continue farming, and that is where now we will lose the touch of conserving the environment. Yeah. So we discourage farming completely. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for really, really great talk, and for Phoebe for sharing, and Pubudini, I'm sorry that she wasn't able to thank her at the end.